Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Ask You Anything presented by Mosher Consulting. I'm your host, Angel Leon, Mosher's HR advisor. Today's episode continues a series of podcasts centered around data and analytics. In this episode, you'll listen to Sean Mcadams, who is Mosher's Vice President of Data and Analytics. This is a wrap-up for this year's series of podcasts from our Data and Analytics group. And among other things, Sean speaks about what you can look forward to in next year's series of Data and Analytics episodes. Without further ado, here is Sean Mcadams.
Thank you, Angel. This is Sean Mcadams, Vice President of Data and Analytics at Mosher Consulting. I want to do a few things today as we sort of close out the podcast for Data and Analytics for 2021. I want to take a look at some of the things that we've covered. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to them, you'll have a little bit of an idea about what we discussed this year. Things that we're going to take a look at next year that I'm kind of excited about, a couple key things. And then answering a specific question. And I think this is really the main question that those of us that are in the space of managing data and analytics have to answer. And it's, how effective is my organization at leveraging data and analytics to power business and operational models? It's a tough question. And I think there's three specific areas that we need to think about in order to answer that question. First, it starts off how effective. And so we know that we're going to need something by which to measure this particular question, a maturity model. So I want to take a look at that. How do I measure organizationally maturity using data and analytics? And there's a couple ideas that we have to share today. What is data and analytics? I mean, if you're going to measure effectiveness of how your organization is at leveraging it, what is it? And we've spent a large portion of this year's podcast talking about data and analytics strategies. I'm going to recap that a little bit. How do I deliver data and analytic products? And then the last part of it, to power business and operation models. And I think that's one of the most important and key concepts. How do you know where to focus? What should be our focus? What should be our mindset? And that's really around the economics. And using some economic concepts in order to know what initiatives to look at. When you think about economics, that's pretty much the social science of studying choices that individuals make within the business. Obviously, it's applied to government entities and societies as they cope with specific economic factors, and we're going to cover a few of those. But when you look at the perspective of economics and as it relates to data and analytics, I think it's important that you understand the difference between an accounting perspective and an economic perspective. So an accounting perspective would look at something, the value of something as it relates to its exchange. So what is somebody willing to pay for this particular service or this product, this commodity? Or what did you pay in order to receive that particular service or commodity? And that's sort of the accounting perspective. And a lot of times when people are looking at data and analytics and what we should focus in on, we look straight to that accounting perception, and we're trying to understand from a monetary perspective, how much do I invest, or what is this going to cost? What is somebody willing to pay for it? And one of the things that I challenge us to do as leaders within data and analytics space is kind of change our perspective a little bit, and that we should be looking at the value and use. And that's the economics perspective that says, how much value can I create from using this commodity, from using this asset? And I really think that that's the key perspective that we need to look at when we're trying to figure out what do we focus on. A lot of people want to become data-driven. And they say that, a lot of leaders, we want our organization to be data-driven. And that really doesn't describe so much an organization. It describes the decisions that an organization's making. Being data-driven means having data, collecting data, and it focuses our minds on data. But there's a misunderstanding that having data is valuable in and of itself. What we really want is for our organizations to be value-driven. So instead of having data, collecting data, and our minds focused on data, it's having ideas, collecting ideas and having our minds focused in on ideas, because the value of data is actually determined by how you use it. And so although we want our decisions to be data driven, we want the organization to be value driven. And that is in line with that economic mindset. How much value can you get from using an asset, in this case, data assets? Now, when you think about creating monetary value out of your data assets, I'm not necessarily talking about selling it, and that's the value it's going to provide. If we look at some economic factors like the law of supply and demand, right? So this relationship between the quantity of a commodity that a producer wishes to sell and the quantity that consumers wish to buy. When you apply that to data and analytics, what you find is not all data is of equal value. Not every piece of data is as important as another. And what is that supply and condition? What is the quality and the accessibility, the completeness of data? And do we have processes in place for validating and valuing and prioritizing those particular demands? So again, we're looking at the economic perspective of data and analytics. Supply and demand is one of those we need to think about. Scarcity is an economic factor. And when we apply that to data and analytics, scarcity usually being this balance between seemingly unlimited need and the fact that we have limited resources. We have limited financial resources, human resources, time. And so the ramifications of that for data and analytics is not having all the data we need in order to meet, particular needs within the organization. It also comes in not sharing data in silos within the organization, sort of holding captive specific knowledge so that we can make, better choices. We think about knowledge and wisdom. One of the things I say a lot is knowledge is information. You're learning it, but wisdom is the correct application of that knowledge. One of the ramifications that we see within organizations for data and analytics is what I'll call sort of this shadow power, shadow IT. We have data silos. We're not wanting to share a specific amount of information. And so that's a way that this economic scarcity affects data and analytics. It also means that we have to focus on the most important thing. We see that play out within the decisions we make for an organization. And if you put that scarcity model as it relates to data and analytics, it means you have to focus on the things that are most important, the things that provide the most value. When you look at law of supply and demand and scarcity, then you start to understand some other economic concepts like postponement theory. So that would say, let's implement a strategy that looks to maximize the possible benefits and minimize risk by delaying a specific decision until we can get more information. We're going to postpone making a decision because we think that waiting outweighs a potential risk for making a bad decision. And that plays out directly with the use of data and analytics, of not having enough information, or maybe you have the data, but you haven't transposed it into information. So when we talked about this year about delivering data and analytic products, data as a service, and analytics as a service, you have this transformation of data into information for the organization. So maybe you have the data, but just hasn't been transformed into information that you need in order to make those decisions. One of the last areas that I kind of want to look at for economics is efficiency, right? So the relationship between ends and means. So if we describe something as inefficient, we're usually claiming that we can achieve that desired end with less means, or that if we employed the same means, we should be able to produce more of the desired ends. And the focus from a data and analytics perspective there is on driving optimization, on identifying inefficiencies, on prioritizing, again, those most important use cases. there's capital that exists in every organization. So these non-financial assets, of which data is one, and the ramifications of that capital is being used to drive optimization. It's being used to mitigate risk, uncover new opportunities, and even delivering a better experience for our customers and for our employees. So if we want to look at that question about how effective is my organization at leveraging data and analytics to power business models, and you look at that last prepositional phrase there, to power business and operation models, we need to ensure that those that we're empowering with data are using it for the most important things, the things that are through that economic perspective. Now, if we go back at how effective is my organization at leveraging data and analytics, we really have to define kind of what that means, what data and analytics means. And so this year, we focused a lot on strategy. When we engage with organizations and people think about a data and analytics strategy, they really think a lot of times about a particular use case. I mean, they're really focused in on that micro level and just that one particular use case. And we want to boil that back a look at the macro level. We want to look at how does the organization deliver data and analytics so that we can set a strong foundation, and then everyone knows, hey, this is how we're going to deliver, this type of service, and here's the part you play in it. So if you go back and you listen to the podcast where Warren and I are talking about data and analytics, we talk about those at the very foundation. We say, hey, here's why we exist. We give that basic reason of why. And then we say how. We say that organizations should deliver data and analytics, not through functional areas and organizational charts, but rather through supporting platforms, data engineering, and insights. And that those delivery channels correspond directly to the service models that you want to implement as an organization. If you want to be a data as a service, you're going to predominantly have focus within platform and engineering. You're going to have a lot of people in the space of insights, taking data and a self-service IT type of setup and using it to create insights. If you're just getting started, we advocate you're an analytics as a service model. So you have a core team that is doing all of those particular activities, the platform, the engineering, and the analytics, so that you can start to build out the policies that support data governance and start to educate the organization. Our managed service that we run at Mosier, we call it Honeycomb. It's an analytics as a service model. So it's built to help organizations get value out of data. They're not in a position or have a desire to want to invest in software and people. They just need a partner. They need a partner that's going to support platforms, engineering, and insights, so they can get those value-based analytics into their decision makers' hands and make data-driven decisions. And that's the model that we use in our consultancy services to help organizations. And every client we've talked with, has a gap somewhere within that, because that's not the mindset that they approach delivering data and analytic products. We talk about some core concepts for a platform. So things that you want within that platform to support analytic workloads, data engineering layers. And so we describe those as transient, raw, trusted, and refined, and the activities that you should do in each of those areas. That sets a strong foundation for governance, where you're going to assign policy and then implement enforcement through process. And then lastly, how we look at analytic maturity. And that's the last part that we need to answer in order to answer this question about how effective is our organization at leveraging data and analytics to power business and operational models. One of the things you can do when you are analyzing maturity is look at the micro level, that use case, and classify where it is from BI to AI. And that's one of the things that we really advocate. There's a very common model that exists for analytic maturity that Gartner had put out some time ago, and it charts the growth of BI, business intelligence, to artificial intelligence over value and complexity. And if you read that chart, what it says is that you'll get a low level of value, but it's also not very complex to do business intelligence. And you get a lot of value, but it's also super hard to do artificial intelligence, neither of which is true. And so it's not something at Moser that we advocate. Rather than doing that, we flip that curve around and we say what we're trying to focus in on is how do we reduce the amount of human input necessary to make a decision, and using techniques to learn about the decisions that the organization is making using these particular analytic products. And then how can we use machine learning in order to optimize those? And so one tool that you can use in order to analyze analytic maturity is look at the actual analytic products in use at the organization and where do they fall on this scale of business intelligence. So going from descriptive analytics to diagnostic, predictive to prescriptive, where does it fall? And what is our ability to further increase the maturity of that particular insight as the organization is using it? The other thing that you can do is look at how you're getting your business from business monitoring into digital transformation. And there's 5 areas that are very commonly talked about for this type of maturity model. Go from business monitoring into business insights. So the way you get from there is applying those key business use cases, right? Go back to our economics discussion, what we're focusing in on. So we're going to go from business monitoring into creating these business insights that are predominantly first going to look at prescriptive recommendations for business optimization. So we want to go from business monitoring to creating business insights to business optimization so that we're getting better at what we're doing. And we're applying those economic models of efficiency, for example, in order to, get better. And then we're going to look at how we monetize those particular insights. So go from business monitoring into creating business insights. We want to drive business optimization. We want it to monetize our particular analytic products to the organization. Again, applying those economic perspectives to get into digital transformation to create competitive advantages. And there's a number of resources that are available for us to look at and examples of organizations that have delivered services in line with this, concept. You think about, the models that organizations had for selling books, right? And you can look at organizations like Borders, and then now Amazon, right? And you can see the application of digital transformation in the delivery of those particular products. And I believe that data and analytics stands at the core of our ability to find those particular efficiencies that create the path, the roadmap toward data and analytics. And most organizations we talk to, though, there's this gap. There's this gap that exists between descriptive analytics and diagnostic analytics. And so you're looking at the maturity of your organization. You're going to create some data awareness. There's a lot of organizations that are doing that in very manual processes, looking at operational systems, extracting and working with data in Excel. And they're creating some reports that sort of answer what's going on, what has happened, these descriptive analytics, these facts that are created. We see this in even some traditional data warehouse designs. But there's this chasm that exists to get from that type of architecture that supports analytics into a modern data framework, a lot of which Warren and I have talked about this year, so that we can apply machine learning to get to predictive insights, and we can correctly apply knowledge, that's wisdom, through prescriptive analytics, and we can start to create digital transformation opportunities. So at Mosier, we have all of these collateral within our consultancy services. If you're interested in applying those to your organization or taking a look at that, we have a playbook that we put out this year that talks specifically about strategy. So I definitely want you to reach out if anything that we're talking about and answering this question sort of resonates in these areas where how do we get our organization to really prioritize their needs based upon economic factors that actually drive business value, because that's where we want to get. If you go back to the very first podcast, Warren and I, we talked about why do we exist. We said we exist to help define and deliver a data and analytics strategy. And that strategy was data functioning through technology, which is predominantly the reason why organizations call us, because they look at us as an IT service shop or professional services shop, but it's also people operating through process. It's these same very common key business drivers: people, process, technology. Sometimes people refer to as people, process, and products. Now we add data as a layer because that's the area of focus for us. So people, process, tech, and data. But if we can answer questions on how we deliver those particular areas, how we want to mature those particular areas, the types of philosophies and guidelines that we want to implement, then we can start to introduce business strategy that are guided by value-based mindsets in order to produce insights that the organization takes action that drives business strategy. That's a very key concept and the reason why we exist. It's at the front of every presentation that we give, because we want to set that foundational understanding of this is how we look at data and analytics. Well, as we go through next year, there's a couple key topics that we're going to focus on that I'm super excited about. It goes a little bit deeper than areas that we covered this year, which again focus predominantly on data and analytics strategy. That's around data governance. So how does Mosier look at data governance? What is our framework? How we do assessments on that, and consultancy services and audit services and so on and so forth. So we'll be looking at that here within 2022. And another area I'm excited to get into for data and analytic products and talking about is the human-centered design approach. I think that design thinking is becoming involved in more conversations for people that are in data and analytics. We've had a very strong focus this year within human-centered design for our analytic products and trying to increase quality of our analytic products, trying to increase data literacy, and ultimately, customer engagement and satisfaction. We want the products that we create to really drive business value, to reduce the time to make decisions, and we want those to be created based upon the consumers. And so applying human-centered design principles is something that we'll get into in 2022. And I'm really excited about that. I hope that this year you've enjoyed the podcast around data and analytics. If you guys have any questions for Mosier, for the data and analytics division, make sure you want to fire those in. This podcast is named Ask Ye Anything for that particular purpose. We want to use it to create credibility within the community and get information out. And you guys learn a little bit about Mosier, about our resources, about our offerings, and how we can, help partner to solve particular challenges that are being faced within your organization. But we also, want to solicit particular questions that you have so that we can meet our goal of being a trusted advisor. I appreciate your guys' time this year and listening to us through these podcasts, and look forward to continued discussions around data and analytics in 2022.
Thank you for listening in to this week's edition of Ask Ye Anything presented by Mosier Consulting. We hope you enjoyed Sean's recap of our series of podcasts centered around data and analytics. Our data and analytics group will join us again next year for another series of podcasts centered around that topic. Join us next week when we continue to dive deeper with our resident experts and what they're currently working on. And remember, if you have an idea or a topic you'd like us to explore, please reach out to us through our social media channels. In the meantime, please remember to give us a rating and subscribe to our feed wherever you get your podcasts. Until then, so long everybody.